Classic movie, Groundhog Day. It's a perfect example of this. It was my favorite movie growing up, at least for several years, where Bill Murray is stuck in the same day over and over again, and he just doesn't get it. He's just so dismissive of other people and cultures and narcissistic and condescending and and he's stuck in the same day over and over again. And first he uses the opportunity to learn about people and manipulate them and learn a little more about a woman every day until you can eventually impress her enough, those kind of things. But even then, it still wasn't enough because it was all gone the next day. Then he tries to kill himself because he's sick of it. And finally, he learns that he could be using this time to learn. So he teaches himself piano and ice sculpting and all these other things. And eventually, he truly wins the love of the person that he's after. And then he wakes up on a new day. So, I mean, it's as if they were reading the book 10 years before it was published, the producers of that movie. People can have different mindsets on different days. It's not fixed, it's not set in stone, but clearly we want to try and coax ourselves towards a more prosperous mindset. Growth mindset allows us to love what you're doing even when you fail. Fixed mindset people can still be confident, but it's more fragile. I mean, I was super confident going into university, and then because I'd never gotten anything but A's, and then computer science in university, on my first test I got a B, and it was so frustrating and annoying that I just kind of resigned myself to getting B's. I was like, well, I mean, I don't want to try much harder, so I guess I'll just keep the same level of effort and get B's. And yeah, I didn't get as much out of the degree as I certainly could have. In junior high, everyone's grades suffer because of going through adolescence, while at the same time the school pays less attention to you, there's more people in class, and a whole bunch of other factors. But the grade disparity is, as you may have guessed, disproportionately represented by fixed mindset people who tend to retract from the situation rather than trying harder. They resign themselves to being a certain level that potentially they may never recover from. No, thank you. Toll-free service. Thomas Edison. When people are asked to think about Thomas Edison, they usually think of a rogue genius sitting in his basement tinkering with machines and light bulbs. But in actuality, he had a giant team of scientists and researchers, and he was big into PR and did all kinds of things. It was a massive group effort. I think there was over 30 people, in a corporate funded office that were working on the light bulb. Just chemists and glass blowers and mathematicians all working together, and it took years to get to it. But we just think of that one moment of genius synonymous with a light bulb, but it's not the case. Fixed mindset mobilizes resources, but not to grow, it's to protect the ego. So rather than risk the feeling of failure, it's just to rationalize it away or find something else. People believe that prodigies have a gift, but in most cases it's just constant curiosity. It's great mathematicians of the past, think of, it's like they weren't necessarily better than other people. They never stopped. They worked tirelessly. They were just endlessly drawn into the infinite abyss of mathematics and wanted to make as much progress as they could. Because of that, they did. Lots of intelligence is wasted on underestimating abilities. There are the inner city kids trying to learn math, and one teacher just treated them all like geniuses and continued to stoke the growth mindset and had record results with something like a record number of students getting college scholarships. And as it appears that with enough perseverance and the right mindset, almost anyone can learn almost anything. Like there's no finish line for the great things. Like Charles Yeager, who was the first pilot to break the sound barrier. He said it's like it wasn't easy. Like I wasn't born a pilot. It's because I flew more than other people and never stopped learning. And became immortalized as the first ever fastest person. Praise, counterintuitively, can stoke a fixed mindset if it's given, to try and encourage people to keep going. Oh, that's great, that's excellent. Then when people encounter problems, then they're not getting the praise. Then it has a very detrimental effect. So it's got to be moderated. The only way not to fail is not to be great. That is classic fixed mindset ideal. And those type of things can lead to all kinds of problems and addictions. Personally, I have a story like that. I remember I was at a party after a choir concert, and someone said to me, "Evan, I don't know what it is you're going to do, but I know it's going to be great." And at the time, that made me feel awesome. But then as time went on, I started like, oh God, I've got to be great. Somebody projected it. And if I'm not great, then I've defied fate. But really, the greatness is in the hard work and the effort. Negative labels can convince people of their own ineptitude, such as girls can't do math, girls aren't good at science, certain racial groups aren't as good at certain things. And it turns out that even just asking people if they are a member of these classes before taking a test can have negative influence on their results. But guess who doesn't have the negative influence on the results? Growth mindset. That's right. Growth mindset takes the teeth right out of stereotypes. They got no bite, because it's not to do with anything. It's perseverance that makes the difference. Fixed mindsets tend to blame their teachers. That person didn't like me. It's a pompous ass, But how does that help anybody with their future success? So don't trust other people's estimations or their negative opinions. Funnily enough, males receiving more criticism, as they've been shown to do at 8 times higher rate as children, both from adults and from other boys, tends to make them a little bit more immune to criticism, whereas girls tend to take it to heart more. And it often is found to affect them much more later in life. So if you're listening, spread out your criticism. Greater than 50% of society belongs to some stereotype that is negatively connotated in certain situations. So there's lots of room for growth mindset out there. Billy Beane. I just watched the movie Moneyball a few weeks ago, so this one's nice and fresh in my mind. He was played by Brad Pitt. He ran the Oakland Athletics on a shoestring budget. But when he was a kid, or when he was younger, he was recruited into the major leagues with incredible potential because he had incredible skills. They predicted him to be the next Babe Ruth. But he did not have the right mindset. And he looked at others who had less talent succeeding far more, and eventually realized that he didn't have the head for it. He was a slave to his own talent. It was so great that he just didn't know how to put in effort. And once he got to the top level, his pure talent just wasn't enough. So he became one of the most successful scouts in history, and using some sweet mathematics, found a way to buy a mindset rather than buying talent. So they focused on specific things about how to make runs in baseball and how to win, not how to have stars, and consequently managed to set a record of 22 consecutive wins, even with the second lowest budget in the league. So it shows quite strikingly how powerful it can be just to approach things with open growth mindset. Champions are often measured, like in boxing. The tail of the tape is the specific numbers, the height, the weight, the reach, all of these things that are supposed to indicate who the likely champions are. Muhammad Ali failed all these measurements. He didn't box normally. Whereas the first champion that he beat, Sonny Liston, was a natural, did have all those things, and did pass the tail of the tape. But Muhammad Ali spent weeks learning everything he could about him, sitting there thinking and trying to get inside his head, and effectively won the game mentally. And that persisted throughout his career to be arguably the most successful boxer of all time. And we got Michael Jordan, Steve Nash. They were both, I added Steve Nash because I know a story about him. They said that Michael Jordan, after the last game of the season, spent 2 hours practicing shots because he was getting ready for the next season. He wasn't just sitting on his laurels. I remember hearing Steve Nash the day after he won league MVP, effectively the best player in the world. He showed up 2 hours early to practice. So, I mean, if that isn't a growth mindset, I don't know what is. Whereas having it, like natural athletes like John McEnroe and Billy Beane, can sometimes be a curse. I know myself, it was kind of a curse to have so little trouble in high school, that the putting in the effort in university was a lot more work because I wasn't used to it. Things were arguably too easy in high school, and I got a false sense of superiority. When they asked Mia Hamm, "Are you the greatest in the world?" she said, "No, and because of that, I just might be someday." I like that one. Ability can take you to the top, but it takes character to keep you there. And that's why champions and top musicians and people that stay at the top of their field for a long time is because they're constantly reinventing themselves, constantly learning, constantly challenging, all these great things we've been talking about. And champions, they're still proud even if they fail. In a fixed mindset, setbacks will label you. Take Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I know there's a lot of sports analogies. Pretty much 85% of the book is sports, which is kind of funny because it's written by a female psychology professor. It's not what you would naturally expect. But personally, I think it works well because sports is pretty much the purest meritocracy there is. Like, it doesn't matter how much you talk. If you can't perform, you're gone. Like, you're not. It's all about the merit. So in the 70s, they outlawed the slam dunk in college basketball. And Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was over 7 feet tall, so kind of like the slam dunk. But rather than be labeled by that, rather than have it be a setback, he focused on new skills, like his famous sky hook, which nobody could defend because he had arms as long as a freight train. Tiger Woods' partner was Mark O'Meara, and he trained and was friends with Tiger Woods, and clearly is one of the greatest golfers of all time. So he had Mark O'Meara had two choices. You could either be jealous of Tiger Woods' accomplishments or use the opportunity to learn from him. And because of that, he eventually won his own championship. Personally, this is one of my actual success stories. I realized that I did have a growth mindset in the past when Leon Torides joined the choir that I was in. And he was basically the best thing that had ever hit that choir. Like, he was just unbelievable, like supernatural voice. And he sat right next to me, and I was like, up until that point, I had been one of the best people in the choir, but it was just like, there's no comparison here. This is another level. But it didn't bother me for some. I mean, typically that would have bothered me, but I was just like, okay, this is an opportunity. And for the next 2 years, I just sat there thinking, sound like this guy. And it definitely helped. Some stars say we in their interviews after games, and others use I. I think that's also very telling of mindset. And I've noticed that a lot in video game speed running too, when people set these world records playing these old Nintendo games or things. sometimes people go, we did it, even though it's obviously just them, but they're talking about, all the people that are watching them and supporting them, and then other people is like, I did it, and it sticks out like a sore thumb to me. I'm like, come on, man, you're alienating your entire viewer base. It's what we think. Every sport is a team sport. As the world record female swimmer for distance ended up going 102.5 miles, shattering the previous record. But it took her a team of 51 people, everything from nutritionists to psychologists to divers that were diving ahead to make sure there were no sharks, and people that coached her through nausea and hallucinations. And it clearly was not a team sport. Could not have been done on her own. So to sum up for today, we don't want to fall into somebody, nobody syndrome. It's not whether you're a somebody or a nobody. If you succeed, you're a somebody. If you don't succeed, you're a nobody. If you go for it, you're already a somebody. Thanks for joining me.